On Halloween night, my friends Emma, Josh, and I found ourselves drawn to the old house at the end of Maple Street. Everyone in town had stories about it, strange noises, unexplained shadows, and a history that kept people far away after dark. Despite the warnings, or maybe because of them, Emma convinced us to explore the attic during the party we had at her family's house. The rest of the guests had stayed downstairs, enjoying the music and candy, but the three of us were curious, craving something more thrilling. The attic was covered in dust and cobwebs, the air heavy with a musty scent that made it hard to breathe. As we searched through forgotten trunks and piles of old furniture, Emma's flashlight beam caught on something half buried beneath a moth-eaten blanket. It was a doll, old-fashioned, with cracked porcelain skin, tangled brown hair, and faded blue eyes that seemed to glisten even in the dim light. The doll wore a tattered lace dress, stained yellow with age, and its tiny hands were chipped. Emma picked it up carefully, wiping some dust off the face, and a chill ran down my spine. "This must be decades old," she whispered, her voice barely audible. We all felt it, a heaviness settling over the room, like the air itself had thickened. Josh looked uneasy, glancing nervously toward the attic door as if expecting someone to appear. The stories about the house's past haunted me, especially the rumors that it was cursed, that anyone who disturbed its secrets would face something dark. But Emma was determined. She wanted to bring the doll downstairs as a trophy from our adventure, despite my hesitation. Carrying the doll carefully between us, we descended the narrow attic stairs. The wooden steps creaked beneath our weight, and shadows seemed to flicker just beyond the edges of our flashlight beams. When we reached the living room, the atmosphere shifted again. The party downstairs was distant now, muffled by thick walls, and the silence felt unnatural. We set the doll on the mantelpiece, and the three of us stood back, watching it as if it might spring to life at any moment. Minutes passed in uneasy quiet. Then, almost imperceptibly, I heard a faint whisper, a soft, breathy sound that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. Josh froze, his eyes wide. Emma's face paled, but she refused to admit she heard it. The doll's blue eyes appeared to follow our movements, unblinking and eerily lifelike. I reached out instinctively, but the moment my fingers brushed the doll's shoulder, a sudden coldness shot through me, like a chill wind on a hot night. Suddenly, the doll moved. It was subtle at first, a tilt of the head, just enough to catch the corner of my eye. I jerked my gaze back in disbelief, but Emma and Josh both saw it too. The doll's glassy eyes turned to fix on us. Panic welled up instantly. Emma dropped her flashlight, and the beam spun wildly, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. The whispers grew louder, swirling around us like a chorus of ghostly voices. Josh stumbled backward, knocking over a side table, the crash echoing through the room. "Put it down! Put it down!" I shouted, but Emma held onto the doll as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. The doll's lips seemed to curl into a faint, sinister smile, and I swear its eyes glinted with malevolence. We scrambled toward the front door, but the air grew thick, almost suffocating. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs felt rooted to the spot, trapped by some unseen force. The whispers turned into words, though none of us could make out what they said. I tried to steady my breathing, telling myself it was just nerves, but the sense of dread was overwhelming. Emma's grip on the doll tightened, and then, without warning, the doll's head snapped back upright with a sharp click, as if waking from a long slumber. It was then that I realized the shadows in the corners of the room were no longer just shadows. They moved deliberately, stretching toward us, reaching with dark, smoky fingers. "Drop it, Emma," Josh pleaded, his voice shaking. She hesitated, eyes locked on the doll's face as if mesmerized. I stepped forward and grabbed her arm, pulling her away. The moment the doll left her hands, the whispers stopped abruptly. The shadows recoiled, retreating into the corners as if burned by the sudden silence. We didn't wait to see what happened next. Bursting through the front door, we spilled out into the cold night air, the party sounds now a distant hum behind us. None of us spoke for a long moment, each of us catching our breath and trying to make sense of what had just happened. Emma clutched her arms, staring down at where the doll had been, her face pale and shaken. "I don't know what that was," she finally said, voice trembling. "But that doll, there's something wrong with it. Something alive." Josh nodded solemnly. I've never been so scared in my life. It's like it was watching us, waiting for us. I looked back at the house, its windows dark and silent, the porch light flickering as if warning us to stay away. The stories about the old place weren't just rumors, they were warnings. And now, we had disturbed something that shouldn't be disturbed. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside, made me jump. I kept imagining the doll's eyes following me, its smile hidden just beneath the surface, waiting for the next moment to move again. Emma and Josh called me the next day, their voices still shaky, sharing how they felt watched even when far from the house. We agreed to never speak of the doll again, but I knew it wasn't that simple. Something had crossed over from that attic, something that didn't belong here. The weight of what we'd unleashed settled heavily on my chest, a silent warning that Halloween night had changed forever, not just for us, but for whoever dared to cross the threshold of that haunted house. Still, despite every warning, a part of me wondered if we'd return. Because after all, some mysteries, no matter how terrifying, are impossible to resist. Years before the haunted doll and the eerie house at Maple Street, Halloween held a different kind of fear for me. One that came from a childhood dare, a midnight venture into the old cemetery with my cousin Lily. We were both 9, caught up in the thrill of ghost stories told around campfires and the excitement of testing our courage when the moon was high and shadows stretched long. Lily and I had heard the tale of the restless spirit who roamed near the forgotten grave at the far end of the cemetery, a grave no one tended anymore, hidden beneath tangled weeds and broken stones. The story said the spirit was trapped, searching for peace, and anyone who saw it at midnight risked waking it fully. For us, it was the ultimate Halloween challenge. As the clock struck 12, we slipped out of our homes, clutching flashlights and a small bag of candy for bravery. The cemetery was a short walk from Lily's house, but in the stillness of the night, the familiar path felt different, quieter, heavier, like the world was holding its breath. We reached the rusted iron gates, their creak as we pushed them open echoing unnaturally in the cold air. Inside, the cemetery was a patchwork of old stones, some leaning, others cracked and worn smooth by time. The moon cast long, eerie shadows between the graves, and a faint fog hovered low to the ground, swirling around our feet as we moved cautiously forward. The silence was broken only by the soft crunch of leaves beneath our shoes and the occasional hoot of an owl. We made our way toward the far corner, where the forgotten grave was said to lie. Along the way, we whispered nervously to each other, the ghost story replaying in our minds with every step. Suddenly, we heard footsteps, soft, deliberate, but coming from nowhere visible. Our flashlights swung wildly, illuminating empty rows of tombstones, but no one was there. Then came the crying, a delicate sound that sent chills down my spine. It was faint, almost like a whisper on the wind, but unmistakably human. Lily grabbed my hand, and we froze, straining to see through the mist. The crying grew louder, echoing between the stones, yet no figure emerged. Fear prickled at our skin, but curiosity held us rooted. Just as we reached the edge of the forgotten grave, a shadowy figure appeared, almost materializing from the fog. It was tall and indistinct, more a silhouette than a shape, its form shifting like smoke caught in the breeze. Our hearts pounded in our chests as we instinctively turned to run, the figure gliding silently behind us, closing the distance with unnerving speed. We darted between tombstones, branches scraping our faces, our breaths ragged in the cold air. The graveyard's layout blurred in the darkness, every path seeming to twist and turn unexpectedly. Panic rose as we realized we were lost, the gate nowhere in sight. Just when despair threatened to overwhelm us, we spotted a crypt, an old stone structure, its heavy door slightly ajar. We slipped inside, the cool air inside the crypt contrasting with the night's chill. Huddled together in the dim light of our flashlights, we listened as the footsteps outside slowed, then stopped. Moments later, an elderly man appeared in the doorway, his face lined with age but kind. He held a lantern that cast warm light across the cold stone walls. "Lost, are you?" he asked gently. We nodded, still trembling, unable to find words. The man introduced himself as the cemetery caretaker and invited us to wait inside until he escorted us out. As we sat on a cold bench, He shared stories of the cemetery, speaking softly about the history of the restless spirit, a young woman who had died tragically and whose grave had been forgotten over the years. He suggested that perhaps the spirit was lonely, seeking someone to remember her. His calm presence eased our fear, grounding us in the reality of the place rather than the shadows we'd imagined. When the fog thickened outside, he led us carefully through the maze of stones, pointing out landmarks so we wouldn't get lost again. The moon had dipped behind clouds, and the night felt less ominous with him by our side. Back at the gate, Lily and I thanked the caretaker, our voices still shaky but grateful. As we walked home hand in hand, the adrenaline faded, replaced by a quiet respect for the cemetery and the mysteries it held. That night left a lasting impression, a reminder that some stories, even frightening ones, are rooted in memory and loss, and that Halloween wasn't just about scares, but about honoring what lingers beyond the veil. Looking back, I realized that midnight in the cemetery was my first real encounter with the supernatural, not in the form of a ghost or a haunting presence, but in the way the night itself seemed alive with stories and emotions. It was a moment when childhood innocence met the unknown, forever shaping my view of Halloween as a night where the past and present blur, and where the unseen can feel just within reach. It was a recent Halloween, years after the haunted doll and the midnight cemetery visit, when I first noticed the shadow at my bedroom window. The night was unusually quiet, the usual buzz of trick-or-treaters having died down early, leaving only the soft rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. I was lying in bed, trying to unwind from the day's unsettling memories, when something caught my eye, a dark silhouette, still and unmoving, staring directly at me through the glass. At first, I thought it might be a trick of the streetlights or a reflection from inside the room. But the figure didn't shift or disappear. It simply stood there, watching. My heart started pounding, each beat echoing loudly in my ears. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, unwilling to believe that someone could be outside, lurking in the shadows. The figure's outline was vague, but unmistakably human, tall, broad-shouldered, and utterly silent. I reached for my phone, hands trembling, and dialed 911. The operator's calm voice was a lifeline as I explained the situation, my eyes never leaving the window. I whispered my address, my breath fogging up the glass slightly, and begged them to hurry. The shadow remained, unwavering, as if it were waiting for something or someone. When the police arrived, I rushed to the front door, heart hammering in my chest. They swept the yard with flashlights, but there was no sign of anyone. The shadow had vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. Yet, the unease lingered. I noticed crushed leaves near the base of the window, and, on closer inspection, a small patch of broken glass hidden by the thick curtains. My skin crawled as I found fresh scratches etched into the wall beside the window frame. Long, uneven marks that looked like claws or fingernails. The officers took notes and promised to increase patrols in the neighborhood, but the feeling of being watched didn't fade. I installed security cameras outside, hoping they would capture any movement and provide some peace of mind. Each night since, I've left the lights on in my bedroom, unable to shake the fear that the figure might return. Sleep became a stranger. Every creak of the house, every shadow cast by passing cars, set my nerves on edge. My dog, usually calm and indifferent, grew restless, barking at empty corners and refusing to settle. I caught myself glancing toward the window countless times, expecting to see that same dark silhouette waiting silently. The incident changed how I experienced Halloween. What was once a night of harmless fun and spooky stories turned into a reminder of vulnerability and the unknown. The shadow at the window was a silent intruder, a presence that didn't announce itself with noise or threats, but with the chilling certainty of being watched. In the days that followed, I reviewed the security footage obsessively, hoping to catch a glimpse of the figure. There were fleeting shadows and flickers of movement, but nothing concrete. It was as if the presence existed just beyond the reach of the cameras, a ghost in the digital realm. Despite the police patrols and my own precautions, the feeling never truly left. The scratches remained on the wall, a permanent reminder of that night's invasion, and the broken glass was a silent testament to how close the figure had come. I changed my routine, double-locking doors and windows, and avoided looking outside after dark. That Halloween stands out as the most terrifying I've ever experienced, not because of loud noises or visible threats, but because of the quiet, watchful presence at my window. It was a reminder that sometimes, the scariest things are the ones you can't see clearly, the shadows that linger just out of reach, waiting patiently in the night.